most Holy Trinity Seminary is a pre-Vatican II Roman Catholic house of formation. We train uncompromising Catholic priests. Our mission is essential in the times we live in. The Catholic faith and the Holy Sacraments, if they are to be preserved intact, require the existence of good, holy, well-trained Catholic priests. This is our third episode of a series of interviews. We present to our viewers the young generation of future priests. Today, we are joined by Luke Petrizzi, a seminarian from Virginia. He's in his first year of theology. Hello, Luke.
Hello,
Thank
Father.
you for being with us today.
Thank you, Father.
What part of Virginia are you from?
I'm from the Richmond area, which is more or less in the central area of the state, a little to the northeast of the capital of the Confederacy is where I'm from, which I find very interesting because I like history quite a lot, and there's, of course, quite a lot of American history in that area and in Virginia, the whole state.
Anything in particular that happened there during the Civil War?
Oh, a lot of things in particular happened there. Sieges, battles, armies going back and forth. The 100 miles in between Richmond and Washington, D.C. was very much a focal point in that between 1861 and 1865.
This is very interesting. And could you explain to our viewers what is your background with regard to the Catholic faith? How did you find out about the sede vacantis position and things like that?
Well, since I was very young, my family always went to the John the 23rd Mass. It was at a Mass center that was under the jurisdiction of the institutional Novus Ordo. And from when I was as young as I can remember, we always went there. Very rarely did we ever go to a Novus Ordo Mass, official Novus Ordo Mass. But we eventually left there for reasons that were really accidental, though there were things that reminded us that it was all part of the Novus Ordo institution. For example, they followed the Novus Ordo liturgical calendar. It was more or less the John the 23rd Mass, but it was according to the Novus Ordo calendar. Things like that. At one point they threw out their hymnals that they had in the pews for the people and replaced it with a hymnal that had the ordinary of the Novus Ordo Mass in the front. It was just things like that. I mean, that caused a sort of a controversy, and it was for reasons like that, and also because we wanted to go to Mass on First Fridays at a more reasonable hour than they had there. We started going to SSPX. But interestingly enough, when we started going to SSPX, we found out that the priest who serviced that particular chapel was ordained by a bishop who had been consecrated in the New Rite, had ordained this priest in the New Rite, and there had never been any kind of conditional ordination or anything for this priest by SSPX.
Did you ask him about this, or that was just, I will guess, public knowledge, but did the priest explain why he didn't want to be reordained?
Well, his explanation was always that Bishop Fele had investigated it and that it was fine. That was always his explanation. He would always say, "No, just trust me, trust my superiors. They looked into it, it's fine." And that's what we went with for years while we were there.
And that was like the occasion for you or for your family to look to some other Mass center?
It was very much part of it, and a part of the immediate reason, definitely. Although at that point, at the point that my family left SSPX, stopped going there, I was in my third year at an SSPX school. I was in my junior year of high school, and it was at the point where all of the efforts that Bishop Fele had been making to gain some kind of official recognition from Ratzinger at that point, in the year 2012. That crisis, the crisis of that year, was also very much part of it, because there was questions began to come up basically the thought process was that if Bishop Fele is wrong about is wrong about this, what else may he be wrong about? And although my parents didn't pull me out of that school until 2013, which initially I was, of course, not happy about, it wasn't until the year after that crisis that I was pulled out, in 2013. I finished my junior year of high school there, and then I was pulled out.
Right, I remember when you came here, you, if I am not mistaken, you did you finished your high school in the seminary, right?
Yes, I did. I spent my first year here as a minor seminarian. That was my senior year of high school.
So already you knew you had a vocation, or you were still thinking about it?
I was probably 12 or 13. It was shortly after we first started going to SSPX. I knew that one of my friends there, one of my friends in the SSPX, wanted to be a priest. I don't think he does anymore, but he still goes there. But I knew he wanted to be a priest, and at that point I just decided I did also. People had hinted to me before that, and I was 12 or 13, I think, at the time. People had hinted to me beforehand that I had a vocation. I just was never interested before then. But at that moment, I remember it. I just decided I wanted to, and that was it. I never changed my mind after that.
So now you're here, first year of theology, and how is the life at the seminary?
It's busy, definitely. This year is either my first year, the year I was a minor seminarian, or this year is the busiest. Last year was relatively calm for me. I had few classes. I was sort of the envy of the seminary in that respect last year. But this year it's busy, although it's in some ways it's easier than philosophy, which I just finished, because the subject matter, although there's a lot of it, a lot more of it than there was in philosophy, it's easier to remember. So it's still difficult because there's a lot of it, but it's easier in itself to absorb.
I think you say that, but next year probably you're going to start with
possibly
the De Trino and the treatise on the Trinity. That will probably change your mind again. Any preference regarding the courses?
It's hard to make a decision about what a favorite course would be. Although two of the courses I'm taking this year, De Ecclesia, concerning the Church, the theology on the Catholic Church, and the course on the New Theology, are both very interesting because they're very pertinent to the situation in the Church today. And it's very interesting to see how an author writing in 1906 had already effectively dealt with all of the controversies that are in the traditional movement today. It's interesting to see how he took all of the things that are debated now, he took for granted. And essentially, of course, the things that lead to sedevacantism, he took for granted.
Yes, absolutely. And apart from your studies, you have the special obligation of being the MC. Explain what you have to do as a master of ceremonies.
Probably the best way to summarize it would be to make an analogy to a traffic director on a somewhat more complicated scale. Effectively, the MC, the Master of Ceremonies, is in charge of making sure that everyone in the ceremony carries out his function correctly. It's interesting to read in one of the official liturgical books of the Church that of course it says it in very good Latin, but it says effectively that if something goes wrong, it's the MC's fault. It's interesting to see it put in Latin, but it's
so the whole responsibility of the ceremony is yours.
Effectively, yes, except for, I suppose, the validity of it. But yes, the correctness of the rubrics is my responsibility.
And you find the seminarians that obeying your signals?
Yes, they do. Sometimes they get things mixed up, but especially like newer seminarians who are not as familiar with the liturgy. But they learn well. They learn well.
Yes, one of the Damian, we already had the interview. He is the sacristan, and I asked him about the preparation for a pontifical high mass. So, as an MC, you find that difficult, or at least in the beginning, at least I will guess, was difficult.
Yes, the rubrics of a pontifical mass, of course, they are complicated, but it's very interesting to see that once you understand the principles of the ceremony, you can remember a very complicated ceremony with relative ease. I mean, it's not easy, but it's easier once you know the rubrics for say, an ordinary solemn high mass. It's much easier to move up to the next level of solemn pontifical high mass. It's all the same principles with a lot more things added onto it.
Do you know what you are going to be doing as a priest once you're ordained?
I don't know specifically yet what I will do, although when I was the night before I was tonsured, and I was tonsured about a month ago, I joined Bishop Sanborn's newly founded Clerical Institute, so I'll be working with him once I'm ordained, although I don't know exactly what I will be doing, or even where I will be permanently stationed, but I know I will be working with Bishop Sanborn.
And for those who are considering a vocation, do you have any advice?
I always remember a piece of advice that I heard from an SSPX priest that he gave during a sermon on vocations in general. He said that in the married life, that the joys are apparent and the crosses are hidden. But in the priestly life, it's the other way around, that the crosses are apparent, but the joys are hidden in that case. So in either state of life, there are both crosses and joys, and it's only a matter of which are apparent.
You mentioned SSPX priest, and now I remember I didn't ask you how did you become a sedevacantist?
It was after the summer after I was pulled out of school, the SSPX school I was attending. I was sort of say, liberated in a sense. Like anybody who has been in SSPX, practically everyone who has been involved with them, especially as a priest, for any time will tell you that once you're out of that organization, once you've severed ties with them, that you're essentially free to think, free to do research on things that were more or less forbidden to go near before, including, of course, sedevacantism, the question of the new rites of ordination, whether they're valid or not, things like that. That summer I spent a lot of time doing that. And that was how I became a sedevacantist, effectively, that from having been freed by being pulled out of school.
And you mentioned a friend that you still have in the society. Do you have any other people in contact and you talk about these issues?
No, I haven't had any contact with anybody, nothing significant since I left the school.
All right, so I think this can be the end of the interview, and we ask our viewers to keep our seminarians in your prayers, and also remember that we need all the support we can get, because as we increase our numbers of candidates for the seminary, we need more and more support. So it is a good thing, a great thing, to receive young people in order to be trained for the sacred priesthood, but at the same time we need the help of our benefactors. So keep them in your prayers, and also if you can help, that is, we are going to be very thankful for your generosity. Thank you, Luke, for being today with us, and you can now resume your duties as a seminarian.
Thank you for having me, Father.